The Onyx Boox Note Air3 C versus the Apple iPad. This is e-ink versus IPS. This is a comparison that, although it doesn't seem to make much sense comparing the e-ink tablet with a tablet with an IPS screen, an LCD screen, it's a question that I'm simultaneously told there's no reason to make this comparison, and I keep getting asked about it as well. All tech is something of a trade-off, but is the trade-off from IPS to e-ink, is it worth making? Is the trade-off, if you know you want e-ink to IPS, is that worth making? Now, just to say before we go on, the Onyx Boox devices come in all different shapes and sizes, and so do the iPad. So for example, this is a color 10.3-inch screen. There's also a black and white version of this, which has better battery life, but not quite as good looking screen. There is a version with the keyboard with that same color screen. There are bigger versions and there are smaller versions as well. Just as there are different sizes and shapes of iPad. This is the 12.9-inch iPad, this is the larger iPad. This is a pre-M1, the last generation of pre-M1 iPad, but it's still working perfectly fine, still managing all the apps with no problem at all. I think honestly now, if I was to go back, I probably would look at the 11-inch iPad rather than this big one. I'm going to compare them in 4 key areas with a focus on them as a tool for work. If you're looking for something to watch videos on or play games on, well, you already know which is better for that. E-ink, although it's got a lot faster, isn't going to keep up with the refresh rate on an IPS screen. I've been using them both for a long time. I've repeatedly gone back to the iPad, and I've been using the Air3 C as a relatively new device. I've been using it for months at work, and before that I've used the previous iteration, so I'm pretty well versed in both of them. It is the most balanced e-ink device. Well, what it is it can do more than its rivals because of the color screen and because of some fast hardware and because of what we call the Boox Super Refresh technology, which actually enables it to keep the e-ink screen nice and clean. That is a new development for e-ink, whereas before with e-ink you couldn't help but get lots of what we call ghosting, the image retention. As you change things, it would either need to do a full refresh, so wipe out the entire screen like that and then print that screen again, or you would put up with every single time you moved something, you'd have the ghost of whatever was there before sitting on the screen before. But what they've actually managed to do on the latest generation of Boox devices is add a GPU which can clear out the white space and get rid of that ghosting. Obviously, you've got none of those issues on the really nice looking IPS screen here on the iPad. It really is an attractive screen to use. So because of that, the latest generation of Boox devices, they're incredibly balanced devices that you can use a full range of Android apps on. But of course, it isn't coming close to the quintessential jack of all trades that the iPad is. You can do so much on here, including full Adobe apps, full Microsoft Suite. And although you could install Adobe drawing apps on here, I don't think there is an Android Fresco, but you could install Adobe drawing apps or any drawing app of your choice here on this device. The pen is only optimized to work in the built-in the Boox apps themselves, and that's because of the way it handles the e-ink refresh. So if you want something that actually looks like it's printing the stroke as you make the stroke, i.e. with what we call low latency, you need to be working in the official Boox apps. There are very few third-party apps that handle that well. You can, however, and I do, use full Microsoft apps here, and that is working really nicely here on the Note Air3 C, or indeed on the Tab Ultra C Pro as well. The question is, are either of them the master of any one of them? And I guess this comparison does make more sense now than either Boox versus Remarkable, which is a bit of a classic comparison, or the iPad versus Remarkable, which again is still a popular search term. I would say that these two are closer together than either of them are to a Remarkable. Now I'll talk briefly about the Remarkable and if that appeals to you towards the end of this video. So I'm going to talk about Notes, and Apple now comes with this freeform Notes app, which is really quite good. It's a sort of infinite canvas, scrollable space that you can actually add notes and work with images, etc. This is certainly a powerful note-taking app. And the Apple Pencil is super quick. That's because the way it works is via Bluetooth, as well as some pressure sensitivity on the screen as well. The Bluetooth senses the pen's position and relative to the screen, as well as it having an electromagnetic aspect, which is powered, so that's the charge from the side here, and which is picked up by the grid on the screen as well. So you've got incredible accuracy and incredible low latency. The Wacom EMR, however, which is on all of the Boox tablets, is for me the absolute gold standard of stylus technology. Why is Wacom EMR so good? Well, there's no charging at all needed, and that makes the pen lighter. However, it manages to be ultra low latency. And with this generation of Boox tablet, we're talking sub 20 milliseconds latency. So it's latency that you just don't notice. Essentially how it works is there's a grid of wires here on the screen, and that makes a little electromagnetic field. When the pen comes close to that, the solenoid in the tip of the pen actually starts to generate a current, and that current has a magnetic field of its own, which generates a sort of cone-shaped magnetic field, which allows that grid to sense when the pen is coming close to the screen, when it's touching the screen, how hard it's pressing against the screen, and what angle it's pressing on the screen as well. It's incredibly clever, and it does that without having to charge at all. EMR can do other things, like it can have buttons on it, although this particular pen doesn't. Boox do have pens with an eraser on the back. And the note-taking app has really clever features. For instance, Smart Scribe, where you can just scribble out like this. And don't get me wrong, there are clever features on the Apple Pencil. For example, the double tap to change between the eraser. It's not just good, it's excellent, but I'm much more at home with a Wacom EMR stylus. I think it's better. For me, one of the biggest differences, writing on the iPad screen always feels a little bit tappy, like writing on glass. Whereas even though the top surface of this screen is glass, it manages to retain a much more paper-like feeling. I just think that as you write, bringing up the e-ink capsules is a much closer experience to writing on paper. It's a much more natural way to write. For drawing, well, Boox could absolutely kill this category. It'd be an amazing thing to draw on, especially now they've got color screens here as well, if they would just include a dedicated drawing app. But right now, there's nothing which is as good as, for example, using Adobe Fresco on here, which that's just one choice of the amazing range of drawing apps that you can get on the iPad. And so drawing on the iPad, although it isn't the gold standard, it isn't as good as a dedicated drawing tablet or drawing screen like a Huion or XP Pen or Wacom screen. This is an excellent drawing experience. As I said, it's a jack of all trades, can do everything pretty well. It isn't the very best that you can get. I do really love drawing on e-ink, but I think there's probably a way to go, which will be solved with an excellent app. One thing that I will state though, is that I find the pressure levels too hard here on the iPad. There simply aren't enough brush tools here on the Note Air3 C, you don't get the choice of every color, and there aren't layer blending options which you get in an app like Adobe Fresco. Although you can install third-party apps, they just don't work as well with the pen. There's just an input lag which you wouldn't be able to live with. For planning, I've tried returning to the iPad several times for planning, but I just can't seem to love it. I think it's probably too close to a computer in its function, and it's just a bit too much of that too bright screen time. I prefer the e-ink massively. It's just so much closer to the planners that I was used to using. I've tried different apps. For instance, this is planning in PDF Element, but I've also tried Notability and GoodNotes to be my PDF planner, and to some extent the built-in Apple apps as well, which are perfectly fine. But I always go back, the e-ink is just so much more comfortable for your eyes. And although the Note Air3 C doesn't have the battery performance that a lot of e-ink tablets do, if this is your main use, if planning is your main use, then perhaps have a look at the Note Air3, which is the black and white version. Or of course one of the many other e-ink tablets that are out there that have amazing battery life. The Note Air3 doesn't have the super refresh technology, so it doesn't do that clearing out the white space thing. The trade-off for that is that you gain amazing battery life. And you're talking about probably 1 or 2 full weeks of using the device on a normal e-ink tablet. The iPad is no slouch for battery performance though, and I've regularly found that I get about 3 days with my use case with it. But that's because as a planner, I'm pulling it in and out of the bag and using it for short amounts of time to jot something down or to read something that I have written down. And that's achievable because of that kind of short and sporadic use. And this particular iPad, certainly this size of it, is a little bit too much to be pulling in and out of your bag for those very short amounts of time, but maybe a mini might work really well for that. However, if you are already in the Apple ecosystem and you use Apple Notes, you use things like that on your phone, then I think it's a no-brainer probably to stick with the iPad and have it sync with your already existing ecosystem. But if you find that that's a strain on your eyes, like I'm not enjoying even looking at it right now, my eyes feel like they're resting when they look on this e-ink, I think having an e-ink tablet as well would be amazing for you. I think they'd get along really well with an e-ink tablet. And lots of us are really hopeful that Apple will bring e-ink iPads. I just doubt that that's going to happen though, especially with their investment in Vision Pro at the minute. An e-ink tablet is the exact opposite to a Vision Pro, really, isn't it? For integrations, we'll both have really great apps, and I think the Apple apps probably just shade it. I think Apple apps do always seem to be that little bit more easy to use than Android apps, although the Android system is better if you're someone who needs to manage files and share them to multiple locations. I just find Apple to be a little bit closed down. When I want to share this out somewhere, I only get the options that Apple chooses to give me, and things like Google Drive is there, but it's buried down here in my More thing, rather than just having a storage app where you can actually just manage your folders like an ordinary person. I just never seem to be able to find anything in this darn thing. But that isn't all the files on my iPad, is it? They just don't give you like an option to see all of the files. Nuisance. I think one of the key integrations for work though is going to be your Microsoft things, and they are great on both of them. For instance, I'm a very big fan of pulling out any of my lessons from my work OneDrive on either of them. Being able to edit the live copy here on the tablets is great. And it's closer than you might think in that area. And lastly, well, reading, and there's just no contest here. If any of you can read for long amounts of time on an iPad, then let me know. It's too heavy, it's too bright, it's just too much really. E-ink is of course amazing for reading. And although you can get a Kindle app here and read away on that, I just don't think you're ever going to enjoy reading on an iPad as much as reading on an e-ink tablet. I think it's about preference, and when I thought through this comparison, the words I prefer kept coming up in my writing. I tried to get rid of them, but it is the case that I prefer using for work the Android e-ink tablet rather than the iPad. It hints at something really key about tech, that there is a best device for you and a best device for me, and they probably aren't going to be the same things. It's pretty much a tie across the use cases that I've discussed here, with the Boox tablet coming out better in the reading and the note-taking side of things, and the integrations and drawing being better on the iPad. But I think honestly, if I was to go wider than that, I think that the iPad would win out overall. I think you can do more on an iPad than you can do on an e-ink tablet. But for this purely professional use case, I think the Note Air3 C will win here. At least it will for me. The iPad is great, but I just can't see it as a work-focused machine. Most professionals are going to prefer using an e-ink tablet and having just one IPS, LED, LCD or OLED screen on their laptop. So you've just got your laptop, and next to it, you've got your e-ink tablet. And I do think that the e-ink is going to be the one you'll prefer for your planner, for your note taker, for your work machine, if you're coming from a paper planner. Whereas if you're expanding from using a planner or notes on your iPhone, or certainly if you live on a Mac, then I think this is probably the way to go for you. And I talked about the validity of this type of comparison at the start. And I think maybe the question is, would I really prefer a laptop or an iPad? And that's perhaps more of a valid question. And I do think that in 2024, you probably do need two machines for work. You probably do need a tablet and your computer. Now that could be an iPad and a desktop computer, or it could be an e-ink tablet and a laptop. It could be a phone and a tablet. There are lots of ways to look at it, and it depends on what workflows you actually need to do. And if you decide that maybe the Note Air3 C isn't for you, then perhaps a more limited e-ink tablet is what you want to look at. Maybe one that is focused on reading, maybe then the Kindle Scribe or the Kobo Ellipse. Or if you want one focused on notes, maybe the Remarkable or the Supernote, and check out my videos and comparisons with those here as well. There is a balance for everyone. But if you came to this video not sure if an iPad was right for you, and you've been enticed by the idea of an e-ink tablet, I can assure you that there is a right e-ink tablet out there for you somewhere. Just have a look around.